Yeah, hi. We are Nicholas and Matt from Denmark. We work at a company called NetScaler. We do C-tricks only. And we have a little presentation about NetScaler and how we used it to do some funky stuff on Link. So yeah.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for choosing our little session here. As Matt said, my name is Nicholas. Over the summer, we implemented a solution for Link at one of the few enterprise-sized customers that reside in Denmark. Started out with this requirement list. Basically, what we needed to do was implement a soft logout solution for Link clients. And by Link clients, the customer meant native clients, iOS devices, Android devices, pretty much anything that could touch a Link solution, including browser-based clients. Now, they also wanted us to cover every functionality except ZTrons. Anything else should be covered by our solution. The design here with the numbers and the number of invalid logons was designed to kick in before the user accounts were logged out in the internal AD. So the customer wanted us to lock out people at the perimeter and still be able to use their stuff on the internal side. Now, clause 1 to 10 is all right. Now, the last one, we did have a bit of discussion with the project manager because this is pretty much impossible to do. Take into account every possible combination of HTTPS requests between a Link client and a Link server. But we tried it, and it's working. And this specific requirement caused us to use the pattern set feature in NetScaler, which Matt will cover later on in this section. Now, in short, those requirements became our SA proxy, our soft lookout and audit. We do simple NetScaler response 401 if the users are actually logged out. And we audit everything they do to the NetScaler syslog, which sends forward the data to the customer's solution. Now, this solution is running now in production, supporting about 50,000 users over 3 NetScaler HA sets, one in the US somewhere, one in Denmark, and one in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so what we had to work with was the customers already bought the NetScalers and said we want to reverse proxy the Link traffic using the NetScaler. And they had an implementation of 10.5 build 52. They had both Link 2010 and 2013 running. They had mobile clients, as Nicholas said, iOS, Android, Windows, web clients for the Link meeting, and native clients. So a native client on a Windows machine and on a Mac OS. Now, one of the issues they have, normally in Link, you get a certificate that is deployed to clients, so you authenticate using that one. But normally a certificate runs for like 30 days. They had a limit that said we have to renew the certificate every 18 hours. So you would have to do one login using a keyboard mouse and log into your admin account, or AD account, at least once a day. So that generated a lot of help desk issues because people would get logged out in the Active Directory, and when they got logged out, it was permanent. They had to create a support case, and some system guy had to open the account again, simply because of security reasons. So they wanted us to implement something that could stop it on the perimeter. So I don't know how many of you know Link, but in Link there's some zip validation that we're not touching because that has to go to a Microsoft Link server. But we live in this part of the area right here. When you need to get validated and get the certificate for your client, for your device, that's where we come in. So we live in this area right here when they do the authentication. Now, why not use the AAA server on the NetScaler? Because that would be an obvious choice, because you can also do a logout feature in that. There's a couple of reasons for it. One, Link does not support pre-auth. Microsoft does not support it according to the customer. So that was one of the issues. There's something like OAuth. There's the certificate handling that is specific to Link. And there's an issue with Android devices and the way the AAA server handles it. Because, you know, AAA redirects and you get a cookie, and there's some issues with that the Link client couldn't use. So we couldn't use the AAA server. Else this would have been a very easy assignment. Now, we had to use a couple of features on the NetScaler, but everything we're showing today can be done with the standard platform of the NetScaler. So you don't need an enterprise license or a platinum license, you can do this with a standard one. So of course we had to do a load balancer because we did some reverse proxy. We had to use some rewrite and some responder policies. We had to use variables. Do anyone know what variables are in NetScaler? They're wrapped in 10.5. Okay, we'll explain later. And some assignments, and we had to do an audit, and these are all standard features.
Now, Smash mentioned the NetScaler variable feature is quite new. Came in version 10.5, and for some reason, unless we don't know them, nobody's using this stuff. I did a search last night. One hit on Google, a blog post by Morten Kallersø actually regarding this solution, and one thread on the Citrix.com discussions, and 4 pages on eDocs.
So just typical standard Citrix documentation. Yeah.
So that's it. And basically what we're given here is the ability to store a token, as Citrix call it, either an integer or some text variable, internally on the NetScaler, and then recall it in the policy engine. And it sounds simple, but this is quite a young audience. But now, the old calculators, Christian, you might know. You might even had a calculator without the m plus and the m minus button. It's a simple thing, but to store a variable and then do something else and then recall your variable actually makes what you can do with the product immensely more complex. And this is what we are relying on here, because we need to store certain stuff and recall it when we need it. Now, we need to give a quick shout out to Morten Kallersø. Thank you, Morten, for actually getting us started on using the NetScaler variable. Now, what can we do? There are 2 types of variables. A singleton variable, like a variable in any standard operating system. Just name it, give it a value, and recall it for later. Or we can do a map, which is essentially an index. You have a key column and then you have a value column. And it's only those 2 dimensions that are supported now. 1 key, 1 value. And then there's a scope for these, and as of now, any variable you design is in a global scope on the NetScaler, so it can be referenced from anywhere. In version 10.5e, there is an option to use a transaction-based variable, so as soon as the HTTP request response is done, that variable is deleted. Now, had that been implemented in a non-enhanced version build, we would have used it here, but it's not, and we cannot use that in production. So,
and that's just another thing about variables. The variables are not copied from one NetScaler to the HA. So if you have a failover, it will start rebuilding the variable maps again. So that's something you have to take into account.
Is there a valid reason for that, or is it just?
We haven't gotten a valid reason. It's just something they have to do because, I mean, you could end up in a state where you're using some variables, and within the time they have to build it up, there could be some issues.
Yeah.
But the customer was fine with that. That might be like a time window where there was some issues simply because Citrix didn't support it yet.
Now, this is examples of using already created variable sets. You define it as a global variable, and once the map or the variable has been defined, you cannot change it. You have to delete it and recreate it.
Yeah.
Might be better further on. Now, what we do in the first one is say, right, I want to take my HTTP request transaction ID and save it in my variable map. And what we actually do here is extract the username from an NTLM request and mapping it to a transaction ID. On the bottom one here, what we do is, and I don't think that is officially supported, it doesn't work in the GUI, however in the CLI it works just fine. I'm taking a lookup in one variable map and using that value to do a lookup in another variable map. And I will explain shortly here why we do this stuff. Now, NTLM authentication was fairly straightforward for us once we figured out how to decode the www auth request in the NetScaler to extract the username. Similar with OAuth, which is just header based. That is fairly simple. Now, some Loop clients, however, use SOAP validation, where they send us, send the front-end server, username and password in an XML document inside the HTTP request. So we had to correlate HTLM body data from the request with a HTTP status code from the gateway server. And every time we tried to build a policy in the NetScaler using those two, HTTP red body and then HTTP REST status, it just said no. Cannot be done. We believe it's because of memory constraints, because if the policy engine has to actually verify our expression data, he will need to cache the full HTTP body and then wait and then verify with the response. It didn't work. We could do it with simple header values, which is why OAuth and NTLM would have worked. We couldn't do it with SOAP. So what we had to do was create our variable maps where we extract a username from the SOAP request, map that username to a HTTP request transaction ID. This is the first map. Now, deep down in the bowels of the edocs, we found a certain little feature which actually saved our asses in this project. HTTP rec transaction ID is always similar to HTTP response transaction ID. It's a, we think it's used by the internal application firewall engine. And it's a hash of NetScaler MAC address, some timestamps, and a client, whatever. But we can use it to match a response to a certain request. So this actually solved our problem. So an incoming request, pass the SOAP response, extract the user ID, and use a request transaction ID as the key. And then there's another map which across devices, which was one of the specs on the solution, tracks a certain user ID and his number of failed logins. So you can have a failed login from a PC, do a failed login from an iOS device, and if you do a third from an Android, we will stop you and reject you because we correlate the username across devices.
Yeah, I'm just going to back to that. One of the things with variables is that when you define them, you have a set of stuff you can do. You can set a specific value. You can add one to a value. So if you start at 0, you can add one, and then it's 1 and 2 and so forth. And you can clear them. So that's why we can use them to count. So if we see something, we can count up 1, 2, 3, and then we can do something. And if we see a valid login, something that is okay, then we can clear it. And there's also, when we set up the values and the assignments, we can set a time limit. How long should the NetScaler save this information before it deletes it? So we can say the logout feature in the Active Directory should be 10 minutes. So if you get logged out in the Active Directory, it should be 10 minutes. We should, of course, replicate it over to the NetScaler. So if we do not see traffic from this user within 10 minutes, we clear the value. Now, a thing that is important to note here is that if a user keeps on trying to validate, the NetScaler will just add 1 and start the 10 minutes all over. So, but the good thing is that they are only logged out on the NetScaler. They are not logged out in Active Directory, so they can still browse, they can still word function. They can just not get access to the link client. And that's a very important feature to know.
Solution to that problem would be to create an additional variable map where you map the user SAM name and a timestamp from the last login. And you would have to correlate and say, right, if this login is within 10 minutes of the timestamp logged, deny him, or otherwise let him in. Because if he, as Matt said, if the user keeps trying, he's never going to be logged in. So he needs to stop trying for 10 minutes.
Yeah, but the important thing is they're not programming an active directory. Now, this is just a simple flowchart of the traffic. The link client gets up here. They get redirected from the auto discovery that lands on the SIP because they have to validate to get the certificate. So they hit a NetScaler Variables, that's our load balancer, where we, and this is just talking about the NTML, where we look for certain things. We want to see a post for this URL because that's where the authenticate. We are looking for the header authorization for NTLM. Now, you could imagine that we would have to create a lot of policies because we have to log if a user is trying to log on. We have to, are they successful? Are they unsuccessful? Are they using SAM account name to log in? Are they using UPN? So there's a lot of policies. So what we did, we used something called policy labels that you can invoke. So you can say, this is my invoke filter. So if that is correct, we have 5, 10 policies underneath that it just tries to evaluate those. So we had an invoke filter, and we had some, if something was true, we used a feature in the NetScaler called pattern sets, where you can define a list of URLs that, so you don't have to create a new policy per URL or create add, so you get a very long policy. You can just say, if the URL is in this pattern set, then it's okay, and if the NTML is the type 3 version, because we do not care about the other two, and I'll explain that later, then our invoke label is true, and then we get to the policy label. And now in this one, we're looking at the SAM account and the UPN, and that's because we have to, there's a difference if you log in using UPN or SAM account name in the username, of course, so we have to make sure we match them. Now, for the SAM account, we look down in the NTLM decoded package to see if the username that is trying to validate contains an @ sign. If it does not contain an @ sign, then we know it's SAM account name. If it does, then we know it's a UPN login. And this is just a log. We log it, and then we write it to the new NS log. And that way we can export it over to the block so they can see it in their management or their log system. Make sense? Okay. Now, NTLM. That's, I would say, most of the web authentication traffic today is still running NTML. We're seeing more and more SAML and stuff like that, but this is still a big part of it. And the good thing about this solution is that it's not limited to link, because we don't really care what's doing the authentication. We're just looking into it. Now, the first part is the client that asks the server to, hey, can I authenticate? And the server says, no. You have to reply to this challenge. NTML is a challenge response. So the server sends back some information to the client that he has to respond to, where he has to type in his password, and that's his response to the challenge. And that he does that in type 3. And this is the only one we care about, because these two, they don't contain any authorization. That's just the communication up until. Now, I'm going to quiz you on this one later. So, yeah, this is what NTML looks like in web traffic. So this is the string that we pull out the username from, and that's fairly simple, of course. if you did type 2 and look for type 1, they would be like type 2, that would only go over to there, and type 3 would, type 2 would go to there, so they're shorter. Now, to get the username from an NTML, we have to decode it. Now, this, if you look at it, normally when there's this equal sign in the end, it's space 64. So you could take, you can take this and decode it to hex, and then you can get something we can use. So what we do here is that we look for the header authorization. We skip the first 5 of it, and that's because the first 5 in NTML just writes NTML, so we do not care about it. Then we base 64 decode it, and where the fun part stuff is down here, we get unsigned 16 at this offset 40, and it's little endian. And all this stuff you can read in, if you go and look up the NTML protocol, it's defined. So the username is always the same place. So this is the first part. This tells the NetScaler where is the username in this, where does the username start when this is decoded? And that's one of the things. The other thing is, how long is the username? How much should we read when we found the first offset? How much should we read to get the full username? And that's the second part down here. And then we have to strip some characters. And I'll show you later why. And this, does it contain an @ sign? And because NetScaler is as it is, it does not. Makes sense. So we're looking, do you contain an @ sign? Not. So that's how you have to do it. Now, if you take this string right here and you decode it to hex, and then you put it into an hex finder, there's plenty of those online, you'll get something like this. This is what the NetScaler sees. Now, it's an unsigned and it's little endian. That's what we told it to look for. Now the first part of it was get unsigned 16 at offset 40, little endian. So little, and if you look down here, offset 40, and read 2 bytes. That's the 16. First we had some fun with get unsigned 8, but then you had to do a lot of math, like plus 250 to 256.
Yeah, we had to do the conversion of from 8 to 16 bits.
Yeah, so
just get unsigned 16 made it a little easy.
If the other regular expression looked long, you should have seen the first ones. that was scary. Now we read those 2 bytes at the offset, and we get a value. This value tells the NetScaler the username in this NTML starts from the offset 322. So now we know where the username starts. Now we just need to know how much of it should we read. And that was the second part. Get 16, and it just needs 1 byte, and we have to read 1840. So now we know at offset 322, read 18, then you'll have the full username. Now I had to remove the information area because this is customer data. So I just typed in. What happens is that I read from that offset and I read 18 bytes, and then I get the full username. This is UTF-16, so you would have letter, space, because that's how it is. So we have to strip the zeros, and if you notice in one of the other ones, we strip all zeros.
Yeah, which will work here because there won't be a space in the username, but other than that, this is not the correct way to decode it. This is the poor man UTF-16 decoding,
Yeah.
but it works.
Yeah, it works. And this is just to show how it is.
Now, yeah, basically this is as I see it, a very good example of the power of the NetScaler quality engine. We did a lot of searching in order to solve this problem, and we didn't discover it until we were already deep into the project, so we had to solve this. And it involved, I will not mention the name, but they use iRules in their policy engine. I stripped something of them, found a Perl script which did something similar, and then started looking at how do we, on a protocol level, which this is, do we decode stuff in NetScaler, because we needed to extract those usernames. This is just of course we use this for link. We are building a solution where we use the variable stuff and the soft logout for ActiveSync. So instead of logging out users in the AD, we just log out the ActiveSync device based on device ID. If your customers will have a NetScaler in place already and do not have any form of MDM implementation, that would be a fairly simple way to ensure that inactive ActiveSync devices or ActiveSync devices with wrong passwords do not cause lockouts on the internal side. Other than that, if you have a backend structure which actually can pick up stuff like this, which is a log to syslog, and you are putting the traffic through the NetScaler to begin with, it's easier, in my opinion, to log in on the NetScaler instead of collecting the ES logs and the security logs from the web server on the backend. So as a login or auditing tool, this could also work. Other than that, have you seen or heard of any use cases using variables on the NetScaler? Because I haven't. No? No. Here we get a fair login, as seen by the status code down here, and I only get the unsigned 8 and an equals 3, that is detect the NTLM type 3 message, which is the actual login. One of the original requirements was that that we should only count an invalid login if there is an actual login attempt. So we have to say, like, this is only type 3, because that's the actual login. Other than that, it's the challenge and the server negotiation. Similar for an approved login, which will actually kick off a lot of other stuff in our policy set, including this user has now made a valid login. We log that to the syslog, which ends up in Splunk, and we reset his count, or we delete the value, so that he starts out from 0 the next time he logs on.
Yeah. If anyone's done NetScaler, you know if you have a lot of regular expressions, a lot of policies on a server, it can get a little hard to see what happens when. So we used a couple of functions to make this easier to administrate. It's fairly easy because it runs itself, but if you have to go in and administrate it, it can be a little hard because we have something like 30 different policies to handle this. So we use pattern sets for one, so you can say you can use it to say this is our whitelisted URL. We know that authentication happens towards these URLs. So if someone tries to do an authentication that is not within your pattern set, then you can just drop it directly. You can just send a connection reset to it. So pattern sets, if you don't use them, start using them. They're very easy to set up and maintain. Then we use policy labels. Do any of you use policy labels? No? Okay. The policy label is where you bind and invoke policy to the VIP that points to a policy label. So you have something that will invoke it. Like if the client IP is something, then we have a true, then it will invoke the policy label. Under this policy label, we will have the policies themselves, where you can go. So the client IP was this, but did he also come from an iPad or something? Then you can use autocorrect expressions on those policies, and they will still match it. So you could have a very basic policy on the invoke label to invoke it, and then you can have the more complex underneath. So when you look at the NetScaler itself, it was easier to look at, and it wasn't that complex.
Yeah, we ended up with what, six invoke labels on the virtual IP, the VIP level, which is message handleable.
Yeah.
We started out with 20 something.
Yeah, over 20 policies, and that wasn't fun to administrate. Now we saw something fun with the label. Well, we saw something that wasn't expected. When you do an authentication, you either get 401, try again, or you get a 200, it's okay. But Link was like, I'm just going to send the status code 200 back. Something blew up. So how should we handle that on the NetScaler? Because it's not a successful login and it's not a failed login. So we have to take into account, what if something blows up? We have no idea if the user has been successfully validated or not, but we, together with the customer, we say all we do is log that entry. So if we see something that wasn't 200 or 401, then we'll log it. And we'll write in the log that we saw this response code, 500 or whatever, and then they can investigate it.
We do log it for them. We actually invented a log format for this customer to make it easier for them to pick up the link-related entries from their Splunk system. So we just basically just built this format, and where's the first one with the that's the keyword they would be looking for in their Splunk environment.
So you can just type in that keyword, and then you'll get everything from the NetScaler. And Splunk is fantastic to log stuff in.
Yeah, once you get data in there, it's brilliant. Now, that's why I mentioned you can actually do logging in front of any HTTP-based system using the theories we have explained here. And in most cases, I think it will be easier to pick them up here, add them to the syslog, and then just do whatever you want from the Splunk side of things.
Now, one thing you have to remember when you use these, when you create an audit message, the log message, is that when you set it up, you can take a box that says allow export to external. Else we just log it and you'll find the log thing. And we spent a little time on that because we just made the logging and then
allow user defined something.
Yeah, allow user defined. There is a little tick box, and you have to remember because else you'll just get mad.
If it's not ticked, the policy will not fire.
Yeah.
Without any further information, it will just fail. Now, here, and I don't know how to extract this from an ease anyway. Stuff like the HTTP request header is being dumped to the syslog server as well. Now this is our part of our cover IaaS attempts for that requirement 111, which is do anything that is ever going to be running Luke and fix it with the NetScaler. And the other part is the pattern set. So if we do see stuff regular in the syslogs, we will be able to trace it to a specific item, a specific device, or a specific link version from the user agent, which we don't here. They will tell us which version they are, and we can either add certain rows to a pattern set or do specific filtering on that version of the link client from that specific endpoint.
Yeah, and as you can see in this log, when you have the dollar sign here, it's an assignment that's calling the variables. That's where we get the username. So we read it in the map. So, and we had to strip. One thing well, users, they do a lot of funny stuff. So we were told that when you log in using UBN, it's your initials at domain name. And that works, but someone used the username at the user domain, and that also works. So we ended up when we tested it with the same user having different identities in the maps, and we used the username as the key value in one of the maps, and that is always unique, so we had to do the count on it. But if you have different names in that map, you would have the same user with account 1 and account 2, so the user would actually be on 3, but we wouldn't see it because it was different usernames. So we had a lot of fun where we had to strip it and make sure that when they log in, let's say they use domain / whatever, we had to remove that. So we only ended up with the SAM account name, which was luckily for us, the same as the UPN of the email. If they had different things there, we would have had an issue. But luckily, we didn't. One of the things we also found is that we got this up and running. One of the first tries to got it up and running, and then we said, well, what if you go to this URL using a browser that isn't a link client? Do everything get sent with? And some of the stuff we were doing the filtering on didn't get sent with us, so we had to do something else. So you really have to test your around and test everything. And also try to test, not just from the clients, but test it from a browser. Is if they go to this URL from a Firefox or something, does it still work? Because in the end, if you do not catch something, you can log a user out. And the bad guys, they won't just use the link client, they will use whatever they can. So that's an important lesson for us.
Some notes from our work along the way. If you reference a map or variable which is doesn't contain a value, you will get a undefined in your log entries. There is no way to get a dump of a variable map. Cannot get to it in any way. So we used a lot of debugging to the NSLog just to see what's going on, because there was no way in the GUI to get these data out of here. We had one suggestion to the customer, which unfortunately we were not allowed to implement. It would have been cool though. This runs on 3 NetScaler pairs, as mentioned, US, Europe and Hong Kong. Now in theory, I could take a user, point it to the US link frontends, do my 3 logins, reconfigure my link client to hit Europe, and then along the lines, along the way, I will be logged out. And it's the same AD. So what we suggested was, can we please do an HTTP callout when we have a failed login in Europe, for example, do an HTTP callout with a post request to the US and to the NetScaler pair in Hong Kong, and then increment the numbers in our SAM and count map. It works in theory, but unfortunately we were not allowed to implement that. Would have been a nice touch though.
We also ran into another fun issue. Once we had it implemented, the customer would call us back and said nothing's working. Usually getting plugged out, and we were like, but we just tested it. You just ran a test on it and it works. And it turns out in Link there's this SIP validation, and they had they thought you could only validate towards it if you had a certificate, but it also did HTML because of a misconfiguration there. So they could have 2 NTML validations outside the NetScaler, and then come to the NetScaler, and then 2 wrong there, and then it would be logged out in Active Directory, but not on the NetScaler because we only see 2 validations. So we spent a lot of time in Wireshark, just generally over the whole course, and we could see that the zip validation also offered NTML, so we had to get that turned off, of course, not on. So it will only accept the certificate, because once they have the certificate, it will do that validation, and there's not much we can do in certificate validation. Yeah. Now we have 4 minutes left, according to us.
Any questions?
Do you have any questions? No?
Are they still happy?
Yeah, they're running it in production right now, and we haven't heard anything.
How long has it been in production?
Close to half a year.
Yeah, since May.
Since May. We the last NetScaler config we took from them was May 19, and they've been running in production since then. So and we haven't heard anything. And
we would have heard.
yeah, it's a big company, and they have very strict security rules. They also have a whole security team that tries to break our setup, and they found some stuff in the beginning.
Yeah,
when
they sent us a Pro script,
Yeah.
which used the OAuth to do logouts, and we added, what we actually just did was take the URL they were looking for, add it to our pattern set, and said try it again, and we didn't hear anything else.
Yeah,
So we were assuming that they're happy.
How are they liking the failed attempt logs that you created for them?
they're useful. I mean,
The
I
help
was going to
desk,
say, if
the
they
help-
commented that they've been helpful, I would assume that they are.
the help desks are very happy because they can see directly in Splunk.
What's going on?
You had an attempted login. A user Baba is attempting to log in using NT11 from this device. That login has failed. The count is now 1.
yeah.
And you can do a full log, and then they can actually see, right, yeah, you have been logged out if you look, because you have tried once from your iPad, once from your PC, and now you're logged out.
But you still have the issue of each NetScaler allows 3 attempts. So there's really 9 attempts if they go to a different NetScaler?
Yeah.
No, because at the 4th attempt you will be logged out in Active Directory.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's not as easy to get linked to just go to one location, then another, then another.
Okay.
You have to do DNS hacking and such because it uses auto-discovery and say, oh, you're from the US, you go to this NetScaler.
Okay.
So you would have to hack that. So in theory, it's possible to get a user logged out.
Yes. You
So,
would,
yeah.
read the auto-discover XML documents, send out the link servers, get the 3 front-end servers, and then just hit them
Yeah.
one by one. And yes, you would log out a user.
But
That
we
is
have
why that is why we suggested the HTTP callout, which
Yeah.
would solve that, and they said no.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
the risks
but
are low, risks are low on that, aren't they?
Yeah, they are low, and it was acceptable for them that there was this route. Like when you do a failover from the primary to the secondary. We are hoping that Citrix would replicate those variable maps to the secondary spot. But it's a short time window until it builds up the map again. So it's only a user that's validated on the primary, it does a failover, and then the count on this failover would be 0. But it would have 1 from the other one. So.
And does it, after 3 attempts that fail, do they get locked out for 5 minutes?
No, 10
and then they
minutes.
try again?
Well, 601 seconds.
And then they try again for another 3?
Yeah, and then they can try again, but if they keep on trying, if you keep on doing it, you will get
Locked out permanently, your
yeah.
account will get
601
blocked?
seconds again.
Okay.
So, and that's okay because you're really attempting to try to log out an account or something went wrong. And it's better that they're logged out on the NetScaler than in Active Directory.
Yeah.
So unless you do the hacking and hit the different NetScalers, we will never lock you out on the internal AD. Just deny you access on the NetScaler.
How does the user see that though? Do they
Just an access denied, we just send him a 401 and he
Yeah.
just sees invalid attempt on his client.
all right,
Well, at the time they don't
time,
see me, they-
time thing kind of ticking down saying you've got 10 minutes left.
No, not at all.
We have no way of communicating
Yeah.
that back to the backend. That would be an nice feature.
Yeah.
So you can't do an HTTP post? the web browser? Or
If it is a browser.
But if
But
it's
if
a
it's
native
client
link
on
client on
iOS,
iOS, you can't do
You
it.
cannot.
Okay.
So we just send a connection reset on the NetScaler part.
The clients don't know how to interpret that, do they, at all?
No.
No,
but
but
share file clients as well, so you can do things on NetScaler, but
You
the
can't
client
tell.
won't report back
no, they just get
it's just an error, or actually,
yeah,
500 and
connection reset. So
Question, did you investigate if there are built in any error codes in the link that you could actually use to show something more intelligent?
Error codes that means
No.
something.
we focus solely on this part.
Could potentially be some enrichment.
Yeah, but we would have to be able to send it back somehow.
Yeah.
So no, we didn't investigate that. The customer was happy with just the connection being reset. It was more important for them that the user was logged out in Active Directory than explaining to the user why I can't get it on, because they could just phone support and say, hey, my phone can't get on. They could see the log right away. Oh, it's because you have 3 invalid attempts.
Yeah, and when I try and log into the corporate VPN or even my email, when I do the 90-day password reset network thing,
Yeah, that happens a lot.
I constantly am locking myself out of my Outlook account
Yeah.
because I don't get an error message saying you've been locked out. I just get continual failed attempts to log in. Your password or ID are wrong. Your password or ID are wrong. And I'm like, okay, did I lock myself out or did I fat finger
And
my
that's why
password?
we wanted to do the logout on the perimeter and not in Active Directory.
it ruins everything else, doesn't it? when
Yeah.
it's logged in?
And the cool thing about this is that it's not link related. You can do it to whatever that speaks HTML. Yeah,
Maybe it's not.
maybe we can do it without that. So, I mean, the NetScaler is very, very powerful. We learned a lot from doing this.
Yeah.
And
Good job, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.